In the decade following World War II, the world entered a period of reconstruction, not only physical, but emotional. Cities were rebuilt, families were reunited, and societies searched for stability after years of uncertainty. In the midst of this quiet transformation, a new musical language began to take shape, one that spoke softly but carried profound emotional weight. The soul ballads of the 1950s emerged as intimate reflections of how a generation learned to feel again. These songs did not seek to overwhelm the listener. Instead, they invited them in. Soul ballads became emotional time capsules, preserving private feelings in a public forum. At a time when emotional restraint was often expected, this music allowed vulnerability to exist without shame. Love, sorrow, longing, and hope were no longer hidden. They were given a voice. What made these ballads so powerful was their emotional honesty. The singers did not rely on dramatic excess or technical virtuosity alone. They relied on truth. A single held note, a gentle hesitation, or a breath taken just before a lyric could communicate more than elaborate arrangements ever could. These moments of imperfection made the performances feel real, human, and deeply relatable. The vulnerability embedded in these recordings created an emotional bridge between artist and listener. It felt less like a performance and more like a confession. Listeners were not merely hearing a song, they were sharing an emotional experience. In living rooms, on radios, and through jukeboxes, these voices became companions during moments of quiet reflection and personal heartache. Love, as expressed in 1950s soul ballads, was rarely idealized. It was tender but fragile. It was devoted but uncertain. Lyrics explored promises strained by distance, relationships tested by time, and the quiet pain of loving someone who may never return. In doing so, these songs helped define the emotional language of romance itself, teaching people how to articulate feelings they may not have known how to express. Heartbreak was not dramatized, it was accepted. The songs allowed sadness to exist without resolution. There was no urgency to move on, no pressure to find closure. Instead, listeners were encouraged to sit with their emotions, to recognize them, and to feel them fully. This emotional patience became one of the defining traits of the genre. Loss played an equally central role. The post-war generation was deeply familiar with absence. Loved ones gone, futures altered, lives forever changed. Soul ballads gave shape to this collective grief. They transformed personal sorrow into shared understanding, allowing individuals to hear their own pain reflected in another voice. In that reflection, many found comfort. The roots of this music were deeply tied to gospel and blues traditions. Many soul singers carried with them the emotional discipline of church music and the narrative depth of the blues. This background gave their performances a sense of sincerity and spiritual gravity. Each song felt grounded in lived experience rather than abstraction. Vocally, the style was marked by restraint and control. Rather than overwhelming the listener, singers used subtle phrasing and measured dynamics. Emotion was conveyed through tone rather than volume, through nuance rather than force. This balance between intensity and control gave the music its enduring credibility. Musically, the arrangements were intentionally simple. Slow tempos, gentle harmonies, and memorable melodies allowed the emotion to breathe. The songs did not rush the listener. They unfolded gradually, creating space for reflection. This timeless structure is one reason these ballads continue to resonate across generations. Today, these recordings remain far more than historical artifacts. They endure as emotional documents, records of how people once loved, lost, and hoped. They remind us that while technology, culture, and society evolve, the deepest human emotions remain unchanged. The soul ballads of the 1950s did not simply define a genre. They defined a way of feeling. They taught that vulnerability was not weakness, that longing could be meaningful, and that love, even when painful, was worth expressing. Decades later, these songs continue to speak softly but powerfully across time.